When an abandoned car is found in a pecan orchard one day, law enforcement begins a search for its owner. Registered to a woman living 300 miles away, as police look to speak to her and understand what happened, a body is discovered inside the bathroom of her house, and yet it is so badly decomposed, there is no way to tell how the person died or who it is. Even stranger still, a dead man seemingly comes back to life and, incredibly, confesses to a murder that could be connected to it all. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's one of those hot, dry days in the summer of 2001 in Santa Fe, New Mexico, when they first meet. And it's only by chance that Elvira Segura and Robert Mondrian Powell bump into each other. Elvira had stopped by a Hastings bookstore in Santa Fe that afternoon to order some books. Powell, the manager of the bookstore, at first comes across a bit frumpy and shy, standoffish, soft-spoken. Elvira, a librarian from nearby Nambi, asks Powell about several books she'd recently ordered for the library. They exchange a glance and begin talking. For the next several years, Powell and Elvira see each other at Hastings, and a friendship is born out of doing business together. It seems they have a lot in common, yet the relationship never grows into anything other than good friends. By 2006, feeling the literary crunch of bookstores closing around the country, Robert Powell loses his job when Hastings announces several of its locations are closing. Soon, he has no money, no job, nowhere to live. After they have a chat one day, Elvira is shocked to learn that Powell is homeless. He says he's looking for a place to live, but he has no job. Elvira says she has an idea. She makes a suggestion. With plenty of room at her house in Nambi, which is in the northern part of New Mexico, why not move in and take care of the place? Powell says he can fix anything. So, as platonic friends, she asks Powell if he'll take on any handyman tasks around the place and a few other chores in exchange for room and board. Powell agrees. Nambi, New Mexico is about 20 minutes north of Santa Fe. When Robert Powell moves in, Elvira is 57 years old, Powell the same age. Elvira has long, dark black hair down past her shoulders and is looking forward to retiring soon. One of the things she has been talking about lately is catching up on her first love, reading. Having Powell around the house to take care of things is exactly what she needs. Elvira has been described as a warm, kind person, passionate about her 2 children and grandchildren. When she's not reading, she likes to pass the time quilting and crafting. Powell soon moves in to one of the spare rooms in Elvira's house. One of the first tasks on what is a long list of projects is to clean out one of the rooms that, according to Powell, has some 40 bags of trash stuffed inside. The yard has been neglected as well, and Powell sets out to clean it up. He says the entire house was in need of much work and cleaning when he moved in, and he got to it all right away, staying very busy day after day. He also mentions to Elvira that he can cook. She likes that idea. So now Powell is doing what he later says is 95% of the cooking from that day forward. As the years pile up, Powell begins to notice that Elvira is changing from the quiet, reserved librarian he met so many years before. She seems bitter and cantankerous all the time now, but he trudges on, doing what is expected of him, trying his best to ignore her attitude. He installs a new air conditioning unit and a new oven. He cuts a garden into the barren, dry landscape and begins tending it. Elvira likes to order things for the house on Amazon, like we all do. Powell puts the things together. At one point, Elvira busts her knee, and so Powell takes to walking her dogs twice a day. So we get the picture here. This guy is basically taking care of everything around the house, including the cooking, and Elvira is giving him food, board, and companionship, really. For the most part, the deal between them seems to be beneficial to them both. With Elvira confined to sitting most of the time while nursing her knee, cracks in the relationship begin to magnify. Powell later attributes most of it to Elvira beginning to drink more than he'd seen in the past years. He says Elvira could change, quote, at the drop of a hat and become enraged. He claims that it was around this time when she began to have problems with her neighbors, and one of them took out a restraining order against her. And she was just livid, Robert says, that the neighbor had done this to her. Things seem to come to a head in this regard when the neighbor then calls Environmental Protection Services on Elvira. She had a septic system issue for some time now that she was ignoring. It was malfunctioning and needed a new leach field, which is basically the piping and filtering system dispersing all the water. Powell had suggested that he could fix it, but he needed somebody to dig it up out of the ground first. According to Powell, things got to the point that when the EPS sent Elvira a court order to have the septic system fixed, Elvira ignored it and wound up spending a night in jail because she failed to act on the order. When she was released, they gave her 90 days to fix the system or she'd go back to jail. Powell says she then called in a professional to fix it, but the entire situation had inflamed her and she once again became what he describes as angry all the time. Elvira didn't seem to have many friends and became very reclusive, to the point where Powell says it would take her a few days to work herself up, even to go to the store. Robert Mondrian Powell paints a fairly dark picture of living in the house with Elvira during this time. He claims she started to abuse her prescription medications and fight with him over the most mundane, inane things. He claims she also became verbally abusive. He tells one particular story. Elvira is sitting at her computer. She's listening to an audiobook. Her headphones stop working and she becomes upset. So Powell walks over and begins to, as he put it, fiddle with it, but realizes the connection on the computer itself is broken, and he tells her it's an easy fix with the right parts. Elvira, in a rage, he claims, stands up and proclaims that she is now going to buy a new computer. Powell says that's silly when all she needs is an input jack. Here's Robert Powell himself explaining what happens next, a moment, I think, which becomes a turning point in what is a relationship breaking down more and more every day.
I had a tablet, a little, tablet computer. So I went and looked up troubleshooting on her model and why it would or would not possibly work. And in the meantime, she said, well, I guess I'm going to have to buy a new computer. And I said, well, that's just silly to buy a new computer when this is a very minor problem that could probably, the Geek Squad could fix for you. I said, I don't know why you'd want to spend that much money on a brand new computer unless you really wanted one. I said, that's just plain silly. Let me look this up. And I did. I looked it up. And so I changed the driver to headset, which wasn't that difficult, and then put it in and it worked fine. And so I sat up, and when I sat up, she came storming into the room. She said something about, I can buy my own computer if I want to. And she was just yelling at the top of her lungs. And I said, well, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say you couldn't afford a computer or something. I said, that's really your business, but I'm sorry I made that comment. And then she went on, and she had this bad habit of not sticking to one thing. It was pretty erratic. You know what I mean? It would be from this side to this side to, and it was hard to make sense of it. So I would just sit there kind of most of the time dumbfounded. And then she'd start name calling, and then she'd get in your face. She liked to poke you with her finger too. She was pretty nasty that time. And then, so to tease her, I took the tablet and I put it on video. I thought, well, maybe she'll calm down. And I was filming in her rage. And she did not like that at all. I meant it as a joke. It was definitely, she didn't like it. She left, and I thought, well, good, that's over.
From there, she calms down and she asks him to fix her something to eat. Then he goes out to water the garden, comes back in, heads up to his room, and lies down for a bit. Later that same night, Elvira begins to yell and scream again at Powell. At one point, he is sitting at the dining room table watching a YouTube video on his tablet. As he gets up, Elvira grabs the tablet out of his hands.
So she took the tablet this time and then threw it across the room and just shattered it. One whole side was totally shattered. And I was like, oh, great. And then, so I wasn't going to respond to that if I could help it. And then she, and I had told her not to do this before. She liked to take her hands and put them around your neck or pull your shirt, whatever, like that, and pull you into her face while she yelled at you. And I told her, don't do that, please. I said, you don't have the right to do that. That's not right.
The abuse, Powell claims, becomes intense at times. And if he wants to continue staying there, all he can do is take it on the chin. He says he never defended himself physically against Elvira's outbursts. There had been only one instance where he had been forced to, he alleges, push Elvira because she was on top of him, punching him, and he could not get up. Now, I should say, Powell is a heavy-set man, tall, with a large stomach, broad shoulders. Elvira is kind of petite. Perhaps like me, you might be asking at this point, why in the hell would a guy put up with all of this if it happened the way Powell explains? Makes little sense to me to be verbally and physically abused quite consistently and not leave. Powell claims he had nowhere to go. If he leaves, he's homeless. He has no money, no car, no family. He's on his own. I think we all know that these types of volatile situations do not go on forever as they are. You can only bend a stick so far before it snaps in half. Within everyone, there is a breaking point. Most of us walk away, though. Others don't. I'm going to take a quick break here. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow this show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Be right back. When we left off, Robert Mondrian Powell, a bit of a reserved man with this quirky, silent part of him that I presume is a plethora of issues simmering below the surface, sees that this relationship with retired librarian Elvira Segura has completely broken down. It's kind of an odd friendship the two of them have anyway. Powell is this handyman, fix-anything type of guy who moves in under the pretense that he works for Elvira around the place for his room and board. But that all she does now is abuse him. But he stays. It gets to the point one night in 2016 where Powell actually barricades himself in his room while Elvira is having what he says is another meltdown. He stays in there for 3 days. Doesn't leave. The bedroom has its own restroom, so he spends most of the time sleeping and listening to the radio. As we listen to more of Powell talking about the relationship, pay close attention to how he positions himself as a victim of Elvira's many problems he claims she has.
But several years ago, I was diagnosed, twice, I was diagnosed with PTSD. So my reaction when something like that happens that doesn't make sense is to just go away from it. I just don't want to get into it. I don't like to argue. I don't like to fight. I had enough of that when I was a kid. So I've been trying to avoid it all of my adult life. So
Elvira calls the local sheriff, tells them that Powell, her tenant, won't come out of his room. Law enforcement shows up and talks to them both. Powell explains that he just couldn't deal with her anymore, and so he shut himself up inside the room to get away from her. Law enforcement can't do much, so they leave. Things, according to Powell, go right back to what they were. There's another instance where Elvira is on the phone one night telling someone that she believes Powell sabotaged her car so it wouldn't start. Powell is in the other room, and he hears this. Then gets the neighbor to come over with jumper cables and give the car a jump start. Elvira had left the keys in it, and the battery died. Then he hears her telling her son one day that she is going to kick him out. He's had it. The son, Powell explains later, talks her into allowing him to stay. Powell and Elvira both calm down. Things go okay for a time. One day they have a conversation about all the extra stuff Elvira has lying around the house. Things she doesn't use or need. And also, items she'd ordered on Amazon and never used and did not want to return because it was such a hassle. I guess we can all relate to that. According to Powell, let's have a tag sale. Put everything out on the lawn with price tags, post a few flyers around town, and get rid of everything they can. Powell says Elvira agrees to the yard sale, but insists that he take care of it all. She wants nothing to do with it. During the sale, Powell claims Elvira stayed in the house sewing and crafting. Powell sold a few items himself at the yard sale. And so, with a bit of cash in his pocket, he decides it's time for him to move on. The final straw was another spat they got into, during which he says Elvira swung a chair at him.
We had words, and I said something to her. I said, that's like assault and battery, Elvira. I said, I don't want you to go to jail. And I said, because I don't know who's going to run your house. And so she had sat down on the couch, the little, bed thing across from me. She had sat down there, and then she just started calling me every name of the book and stuff like that. And so then I started to get up, and I went to pick up a plate that needed to go to the kitchen. And I went to pick up the plate, and then she started in again and started hitting me with her fists. And then she blocked the way. She ran in front of me to the door, to the bedroom door, blocked the way, started taking swings at me, which she's not very good at doing. And so I got enraged, and I pushed her back towards the center of the room to get her out of the way. I don't know if I grabbed her like this and moved her, and I said, Elvira, get out of the way. And I moved her, and at one point she went down on the floor, and we got into it, and I hit her. I hit her head, or she hit her arm when she fell, and it did not sound good. It sounded like it hurt her. And also, I went to tell her, get up, Elvira, just get up. You need to leave the room. And she was having trouble getting up in this and the other, but she was just still cursing me. And I lost it. And I pushed her back down onto the floor, and I hit her head several times on the floor, which was a brick floor.
Those are pretty serious allegations there. Verbal assaults and mild altercations and threats have now manifested into what Powell claims is violent fighting. Things are clearly escalating inside the house, and it's enough for Robert Powell. It's time he got the hell out of there.
I was just so angry. absolutely angry. I said, you need to go. I said, you're bleeding over here. You need to go to your bathroom, and you need to clean up. And she seemed a little bit stunned, but she was still just really absolutely livid, screaming and yelling at me and everything else. And
let's take another short break here. And when we come back, I'll tell you how this all plays out, which is hard to believe, actually, had it not all happened. I need to skip ahead a bit here before coming back to Robert Powell and his explanation of what happens. Because we don't really get to where Powell sits down and explains all of this without this next bit taking place. It's now September 2016. There's this pecan orchard in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is a solid 4+ hour drive south of Nambi, where Elvira and Powell were living together in this toxic situation. Somebody is walking through the orchard when they come upon a silver Kia parked in what seems to be an awkward spot. It's not every day you find a Kia in a nut orchard. A sentence I'd never in my life thought I'd say. Police are called in. They quickly determine the vehicle is registered to Elvira Segura. Local Nambi law enforcement, 300 miles away, are then informed. So they send someone out to do a check on Elvira and to see why in the world her car is so far south and how the hell it got there. They knock on the door. There's no answer. They knock again. Still no answer. Yet, as officers are trying to look in the windows, trying to open the door, they notice this horrific stench emanating from inside the house. And any cop who's been on the job for a short amount of time knows that this smell is death. So they get in, and they find a body inside the bathroom on the floor. Must be Elvira. Her body is so badly decomposed, it's impossible to determine how or when she died. Neighbors tell law enforcement they have not seen her in weeks, nor have they seen the guy, Robert Mondrin Powell, living at the house with her. It seemed the two of them disappeared at the same time. So a search is conducted for 60-year-old Robert Powell. They find out Powell has an EBT card he's been using, which is tracked to a grocery store in, you guessed it, Las Cruces. So they set up surveillance at the grocery store. They approach Powell as he is coming out of the store one afternoon. They just want to ask him a few questions. After all, who knows when he left the house? Elvira could have fallen and died. He agrees to go in and have a chat, which is what we have been hearing excerpts from throughout the episode. And I want to pick up that conversation here again, where Powell is explaining that last fight he had with Elvira, which convinced him he needed to leave. During this particular fight, he slammed Elvira's head on the concrete floor after she came at him. Staggered, still feisty as all hell, he says Elvira got up on her feet and came back at him, yelling and screaming. So what does Powell do?
So I told her, now I've done it. I said, I'm going to go to jail because you make me lose my temper. And I said something like, I really don't want to go to jail over something like this. Elvira, this is ridiculous. And I was mad, but measured. I wasn't screaming or yelling or anything like that. But she wouldn't give up on it. She wouldn't stop. She followed me into the bedroom, and I went and I reached in under the cushion in the, the folding bed, the day bed, the futon bed. And I pulled out a gun. And when she went back to her bathroom, I pointed it at her, and I told her, you need to really relax and calm down. I said, this is enough, this is over. And I kind of lost I don't really remember. I remember saying, this is enough, it's over. I don't remember. And I was talking at her, but I can't remember everything I said, to be honest with you. So at one point, she reached down and got it. She had thrown a bunch of stuff like that was on a folding tray, not a folding tray, just a wire shelf. She kicked it, threw it all over the place, and went into the bedroom and everything. And she grabbed what do you call it, some sort of a mat. I do remember that. A shower mat or something. She bent down to pick it up or something, and she went down on one knee. And when she went down on one knee, I pulled the trigger and shot her.
They were in the bathroom. Powell goes on to say that he can't recall where the bullet struck Elvira.
I did see blood coming out from around her neck or back of her neck or something. And I pulled the door closed. And I never opened it again.
He claims to have stayed in the house for a day and a half after murdering Elvira. And really, when you listen to him, it doesn't even sound like he thinks he's talking about a murder. It almost sounds like he's saying, I protected myself. When investigators later conduct a timeline, they realize it is during that time period when Powell oversees the tag sale. Thus, with Elvira lying in a pool of her own blood, dead in the upstairs bathroom, Robert Mondrian Powell is out front of her house selling her possessions. I think it's important to say, Powell talks about killing Elvira in cold blood in such a nonchalant way, such a cold, stoic manner. It's almost as if he thinks he should be congratulated for lasting as long as he did without killing her. For the first 45 minutes of the interview police conduct with him, Powell plays the victim to Elvira's madness. He puts it all on her. After killing her, Powell drives straight down to Las Cruces, where he says his plan was to head into the pecan grove and shoot himself in the head. Yeah. Okay. This is just more poor me, I am the victim here. It's all bullshit, right? This guy comes into the police station, he sits down, and you've heard him. He starts talking about all of this like, geez, I move in and I start doing all the stuff for her, and all she does is drink and attack me and scream at me and yell at me. Mr. Victim. Robert Mondrian Powell is then arrested and charged with Elvira's murder. And come to find out, Powell was actually inside the house for a week after killing Elvira. He had lied about that little fun fact. In December 2016, Powell is formally charged with second-degree murder in a Santa Fe district court. His case gets stuck in the muck of the courts and lawyers fighting over evidence and witnesses and other potential problems that could come up during trial. What's interesting here is that during this time, a total of 8 prosecutors take over and leave the case. It's what we might call a judicial clusterfuck. By June 2018, the district court judge rules that the prosecutor's office has actually violated Powell's right to a speedy trial and dismisses all the charges. So Robert Powell confesses to killing Elvira Segura, but is now scot-free. He walks out of prison. He's on the street again. And perhaps in search of another lonely single woman he can move in on. From there, the case is sent to the appeals courts and argued back and forth. By September of that same year, the case is in front of the New Mexico Court of Appeals. Prosecutors want to see Powell in a court of law facing a jury. They believe he's a murderer. As they all await a verdict in the Court of Appeals after arguing the case, it seems that nobody bothered to keep tabs on Robert Powell during this entire time, because all of that fighting, that squabbling in court, is for nothing. Powell had actually died shortly after walking out of jail a free man, about a year before all of those recent hearings on his behalf started to take place. There was even a hearing about his case on November 8th, 2018, with Powell's own public defender fighting for his conditions of release, but Powell had died 3 weeks before the hearing. Talk about a waste of taxpayer money. Elvira's children put up a GoFundMe page to pay for funeral expenses and other costs associated with her death. On that page, the children wrote this: "We will always remember our mom lighting up with joy and wearing her heart on her sleeve." I want to point out as well, all of the abuse Robert Powell claims in his murder confession, All of the fighting and drinking and acrimonious behavior on Elvira's part are the words of an admitted killer. Believe what you will. But Robert Powell murdered Elvira as though her life did not matter. And so anything he says about her afterward, in my opinion, must be taken within that context. If there's one thing I myself have learned in 25 years of talking to killers, is that they all play down their role and play up the idea of the victim bringing on their death themselves. That's it for this week. Remember, I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts, and set your schedule. You can find new episodes dropping every Wednesday night and log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. And I just want to say here before we close, time is running out to join me on the True Crime on the Rhine riverboat cruise beginning in Amsterdam. I've never been to Europe, so this is a huge treat for me. For details and to reserve your spot, go to sailawaygrouptravel.com/truecrime. That's sailawaygrouptravel.com/truecrime. Sources for today's episode include Confession of a Dead Man, a KRQE News 13 investigation by Larry Barker. State of New Mexico versus Robert Powell, criminal complaint. Robert Powell police interrogation, confession, New Mexico State Police. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.